We're live on Building in Public, and today we have Tinsley, Josh, and Aashay from Edgi Learning joining us. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Cool. So I think this is our first 2-on-3 video discussion.
I like it.
It's cool. Yeah.
Communal.
So the whole purpose, like I was saying, is we want to kind of learn about you and your backgrounds and how you came to build what Edgi is today. And I think probably they all came from like different directions to converge on this. So I wonder sort of what are the sets of like experiences and relationships that kind of brought it all together?
That's a great question. Well, Josh and I met through NYU, and we had been working on some education related things and have been doing that for the past, I guess, 2.5 years or so. So it was a natural kind of evolution there. And Aashay actually linked up with Josh through a mutual friend. Aashay, do you want to talk a little bit about that connection?
Yeah, for sure. And I think for you guys too, it would be cool to just dive into some of the stuff you've previously worked on, because I think it shows the evolution of how you got to Edgi. So for me, 2020, I think for a lot of people was a year of reflection and kind of just taking a step back to take stock of things. And it was for me as well. And what I realized when I did that was the common thread for me through my career, but even before that, was this kind of interest in learning and education and wanting to kind of improve myself and show that personal growth. I've had a couple of career changes which proved to be pretty transformational for me. And through those, it highlighted a lot of gaps within our sort of traditional education systems. So towards the end of last year, I really started to think about, if I wanted to build something in the space, what might that look like? And so I ended up quitting my job to kind of go all in and try to figure it out. And about a month into my exploration, I got introduced to Josh and Tinsley through a common friend. And really the first couple conversations we had, we just really hit it off. And we realized we think very similarly. We have, philosophically and principally, we're super aligned and want to work on similar problems and challenges. I think the difference was Josh and Tinsley started with a high school audience. I was thinking about adults at the time. And now I'm just advising them as they kind of go on their journey at this point. So yeah, that's how we got introduced. But it might be good to go a little further back with you two.
Yeah, I can jump in here. I missed the first part, but I think we're just sharing our background on how we got here. So Tinsley and I both went to the school called Gallatin at NYU, where you can design your own major. And I graduated a few years before Tinsley, but my concentration focused on philosophy, technology, and education, and I got really interested in thinking about technological progress and what the implications were for what we should be teaching students in school. I had my own strange educational background. I went to a boarding school in Boston and got kicked out my senior year, and did really well in things like theater and film.
What did you get kicked out for?
Yeah, it's a long story. I mean, smoking weed, pissing off the administration and other various ways.
All right.
Yeah, it was a fun time for sure. But I always felt this frustration around feeling like a lot of the subjects, like I was just doing work that thousands of other students had done before, and it didn't really have any purpose, or a lot of it was just for like the school, like a school's assessment or like teacher's assessment, but it wasn't really focused on me actually developing as a learner. And I ended up gravitating towards YouTube to learn a ton of things. And when I got kicked out, spent all my time exploring YouTube videos and learning about philosophy. I actually started making a few YouTube videos in my free time, which was fun. And one of them got me into NYU, which I was grateful for. But in my studies around philosophy, technology, and education, I read Elon Musk's biography by Ashley Vance. And there's this great section where Vance talks about this existential crisis that Musk has when he's like 12 years old, which is ridiculous, but combs through religious and philosophical texts trying to figure out the meaning of life. stumbles upon Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and in the book, they create it's a great biography. In Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, they create a supercomputer and ask it the meaning of life, and it spits out 42, which has now become this like cult classic, number that everyone prays at the altar to. But Musk took from this that instead of seeking the answer to life, maybe we should be after the question itself. That maybe that's just not the right question to ask, and if we get an answer to that question, we may not understand it. And so, in his own words, he reasons that we should seek to expand the scope and scale of human consciousness to better understand what questions to ask. And I thought this was incredibly compelling, like like a great result of an existential crisis. But then I got really confused why Elon didn't take this to where I would have taken it, which is to transform our education system and really focus on expanding the scope and scale of human consciousness, which also correlated to all of these risks that he was talking about, like advancing AI and this need to better understand some of these issues that we're now facing in the 21st century. And at the same time, I recognize that he's been very successful at disrupting government-tied industries, the space industry and the automotive industry. And so I focused my studies on trying to figure out if there was a way to apply his philosophy around innovation to our education system. And then ended up doing a senior project where we did a full redesign of a high school, the architecture and the curriculum, to sort of show from first principles what a high school could look like if it was designed with these issues in mind, and this philosophy around innovation. And then it was successful. It actually helped me get a job teaching at NYU the following year. And then I'm at Tinsley, and we decided to run it again as this annual symposium, working with high school students to redesign their school, bringing their voices to the conversation, thinking about what a future education system should look like.
That's
and
really
then,
cool. Yeah.
Sorry, just to cap it off, the pandemic hit last year, so we couldn't host the event. And so we decided to pivot to remote learning. And that's when we started Edgi.
Wow. It seems like putting the students at the center of like what they want to be learning and also empowering them to lead discussions is a really important part of what you guys are doing. And I'm also just curious about what insights have come out as you've talked to a lot of students when you were preparing for the symposium and then like later pivoting into this. What are the desires coming from them in terms of if they were to be fully empowered in their school setting, in their education, like what kinds of things are they hungry for?
I think the main one is just that they're surprised that their voice matters. So when we go to them and we say, what do you think? They're sort of caught off guard. And as soon as they have a taste of that experience, they're like, this is amazing. I want to keep doing this. They feel like their voice finally means something and people are taking it seriously. And then, Tinsley, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. But the other thing I'd say is that a focus on relevant problems that, students see the issues that we're facing and they're confused why they're not part of the conversation. Like what they're learning in school just doesn't match these global problems that we have. And I think empowering them to help contribute to that conversation is something that they really want, and it's also just a good pedagogy. It's a better way to learn.
Yeah.
How does that? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add to that just a piece of feedback that we got from one of the kids. We were doing some interviews, and this girl who we talked to said that she finally felt like she realized that voicing her opinions isn't such a bad thing. And I think that if we can just get more experiences like that with students where they have that kind of outcome, that's really one of the main things that we're looking for.
Yeah, it seems like there's a philosophy underlying this, which I think we're all learning on the internet in part, which is you can be a consumer or you can be a participant or educator, or kind of a back and forth part of that discussion. And I think the historical education, kind of traditional education system is much more consumer oriented and feels like you're getting at some more participatory stuff. So I wonder, like, when you open the doors up and really allow any kind of participation and everybody gets to weigh in, it seems like you need some sort of goals or ideas around what good looks like or what kinds of things maybe are acceptable or aren't acceptable. Or I wonder, how do you think about those kind of frameworks or guardrails to help make sure that it is a good experience, kind of reaches the goal of what you're looking to achieve?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that I want to go to this issue that we're encountering now about sort of student-led discussions. Well, maybe I can just jump to that. So I think one of the implications for that discovery that students really want to have agency and have a voice in the conversation is this realization when we launched these online courses, or these remote courses, basically cohort-based courses for high school students. The pilot program over the summer, I led the discussions for. We made content that students consume. We curated resources online that students engaged with to learn the key takeaways for that week. And then they got into these discussion sessions twice a week that I led. And then in the fall, when we scaled it to 100 students, we had some adults lead the conversation. So friends from the Yang campaign that I worked on, and some other sort of young professionals, and students who had taken our pilot over the summer lead conversations. And what we realized is that students love joining student-led conversations because they really feel like they can explore their perspectives without the pressures or the gaze of adults in the room, or the fear of getting things wrong, which is particularly important for these issues because nobody has the right answers to, what the ethical implications of gene editing are, right? These are unknown things, and yet students are so sort of programmed to think about things in terms of a standardized test where there's one right answer. The problem that presents is how do you maintain quality of those conversations, especially at scale, just by inviting students in with no moderators or adults in the room. And I think there's two answers to that. One is it's a cultural thing. So we pay the discussion leaders. So it's a job. And there are responsibilities that go along with that. And we trust students to take that seriously. And there's sort of like an edgy way, like after they participate in a few conversations, they know what's sort of acceptable and what feels right in this kind of environment. So a big emphasis on culture is important. And on the other side, we're building an analytics tool that takes transcripts from Zoom sessions so that we can just have at a glance know what the content of these conversations are, have flags for things like that. And that sort of helps provide some guardrails.
And is there like an application process to become one of those kind of selected, I don't know if you call it like a moderator or like a discussion leader? Okay. Yeah. So what does the application look like to do that?
Yeah, well, we will, they have to first participate in a course as a student. So we'll have all of the Zoom recordings of the conversations that they have participated in, as well as their interactions with the platform and how the resources that they consumed, and have a good sense for whether they know the content. And then we're also experimenting with different ways to run a discussion leader training program where, they apply if they're interested. If they get selected, then they go through this training program where we teach them the content on a deeper level, and also 4 skills that we think make good discussion leaders, which are active listening, confidence, community building, and vulnerability. And the vulnerability piece is actually, we think, one of the most important, so that students feel, one, that they don't need to know the answers to something, because these are hard topics and high school students aren't going to know all the answers. Nobody knows all the answers. And 2, that they, can facilitate the dialogue with more comfort and flexibility.
Right, and so it sounds like a lot of the kind of discussion leader role is like a facilitation role, and there seems like there's some potential content that facilitator is responsible for knowing, but then there's a lot that cannot be known, and then I assume there's like some community aspect to kind of the participation nature. So I wonder, how do you think about content as a thing, community as a thing, curriculum, credentialing, like where do all these lines or silos kind of touch each other?
Yeah, I can comment on the content and then pass it to Tinsley for the community. We're fitting into a future of education where I think increasingly teachers need not be content experts in their fields, right? We all have access to the world's information at our fingertips. And in the future, I think it makes the trend is giving students more agency and flexibility, having them work in small groups, having them learn how to do self-learning, using these tools that are at their disposal, and the teacher really becomes a coach, mentor, or facilitator. And so in that context, you can have students who have a little bit of context to be able to navigate conversations, but we encourage them to look things up on Google if they don't know the answers, or just say, I don't know, but let's have a conversation about what that means. And it matches the kind of content that we're focusing on, because we don't have specific, for us, it's not about memorizing the terms and knowing what they mean. It's about navigating these tricky questions and what their implications are, and having students really explore their perspectives on these issues.
Yeah, and as far as community goes, one thing that we learned is that originally we were taking a seminar that Josh teaches at NYU called Technology in the Future of Work, and just bringing it to the high school level, seeing how it went. And what we've learned is that the community aspect of this is so key. The students get together in these groups of 10 to 15 students, and we call them squads. Cohort has its own baggage, especially with remote learning. And then with these squads, like, the octopus squad, the squid squad, they like School of Fish, they really start to identify with this other group of students. We started running social events. So they come and represent their squad for like trivia night, Virgin Pina Colada night, game night. And then they really enjoy meeting other students who otherwise they would never get exposure to, whether it's across, at the other side of the county, or, we're hoping to get students from all around the world so that you can get together and share perspectives normally that you would never see in school or hear from. So we're going to continue doing that, really lean into the Discord aspect. So meeting students where they are already, doing more socials, and continue building on that.
And how does the actual, we sort of got into some of the details of this, but if I were to zoom out, what does a student's journey look like from where they first hear about Edgi or you come in contact with them to, like, are they doing this in a full-time role replacing what they might otherwise do in high school, or is this like a part-time side program while they figure out kind of how it sounds like there's a lot of discovery in what is needed still happening. So I wonder sort of how the actual journey looks like, and what place it fills in people's kind of educational experience today.
Yeah, totally. What it looks like right now, at least, is a student hears about Edgi, whether it's through a friend who's taken the program, a discussion leader, or somewhere online. They sign up for a course, and then we're running 6-week-long programs. So during these programs, students log on to the platform, go over some weekly prep work that takes like half an hour. That involves watching TikTok videos that we produce. Those have actually started going viral, which is super fun. Josh made this amazing video on GPT-3, OpenAI's new language model, and that got like...
I think I saw
have you
this.
seen it? Oh, that's amazing.
Wait,
yeah,
now that I'm putting this together, I don't think I recognized that at first. Wait, let me find. Do you have the link to the?
Yeah. Let me pull it up. You just found it on TikTok?
I'm looking for it on TikTok.
Thanks.
I think I just stumbled across it, like maybe over the weekend or something.
Oh, that's so cool.
So crazy. Wow, I want to watch this. Definitely someone needs to pop the link.
Yeah.
I just shared it. I think that's the one.
Nice.
Yeah. So do you do all this through the Edgi Learning TikTok handle? Is that kind of where you've been experimenting with it?
Yeah, exactly. So that video got like over 3.5 million views, which is insane. Students loved it. They're like so excited when the videos go viral. But basically what happens is they log on to the platform. We have 3 TikTok videos up that we produce, and Josh will make them on each key takeaway for that week. And those are the Googleable terms that you can look up, like Fermi paradox or unemployment rate, things like that actually do have basic answers to them. Oh, cool. Do you want to show it?
I don't know if the audio.
No, the audio is not going through, but yeah, this is a recent one on Neuralink.
Cool.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna stop it because it's piping the audio into my ears.
No worries. But yeah, they're amazing. Josh does a fantastic job
That's
with
super
them.
cool.
How do you choose which one, like what your next TikTok video is going to be?
Josh?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you have any other ideas, definitely send them our way. So for the program, that's sort of how I break down the syllabus for the program. So it's a 6-week program. I just pick 3 terms that I think are relevant for students to get some exposure to, and that can also lead to interesting conversations. And then make videos on those things, whether it's the Fermi paradox or, machine learning versus rule-based systems or something like that, that gives some sort of like groundwork so that students can have a shared framework for conversations. And then I think, as Tinsley was saying, we then curate a bunch of resources, so TED Talks, articles, podcasts that are already available for free online. And so where students can then dive deeper on whatever is interesting to them. That's where the student agency starts. They get to choose what resources they want to engage with, how long they want to spend on those things, and choosing them based on their learning preferences, whether they're an auditory learner, a visual learner. Then they write a short little reflection just to show that they've engaged with some resources, and then they use that to as the groundwork for their conversations and the discussion sessions.
And yeah, something I should just add from my perspective is, I think what makes it really interesting and compelling for students is that this type of content or these types of topics are typically not as accessible to high school students. It's in long form articles or language that they don't really understand. And I think part of what I was really impressed with when I first met with Josh and Tinsley was that they were able to reduce the barrier, lower the barrier, so that this could be, as Tinsley said, meeting students where they are. And that's on places like TikTok and YouTube. I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, it seems like there hasn't. Yeah, go ahead, Misty.
I was just going to say, I was actually going to ask you, Aashay, because as you were looking at the space and different people in ed tech and thinking about education, particularly with younger adults, what kinds of things do you think people aren't paying enough attention to when they're building in this space? And what struck you? You could talk about more about what struck you about Edgi's approach, and just curious about what learnings you kind of found as you were taking a deep dive into this after the pandemic.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, and a lot of this came from my personal experience, what I thought was missing, I still think is missing, is what I think of as foundational skills. So things like critical thinking, creativity, even some of the more humanistic skills like self-awareness, resilience. These, in my view, are the types of skills that all of us need as knowledge workers, and will need even 15, 20 years from now when jobs might change entirely. But we're just not doing enough to actively develop those skills. And that's what really struck me about Edgi is that, that's without actively or without explicitly saying to students that these are the skills you're going to learn, they are actually picking up these skills and saying it in their language, in their words. We'll probably talk a little bit about where hopefully this goes in the future, but starting with high school kids, but eventually we expect this can go to college students, to adults, in different formats, but with the same principles in mind. Mm-hmm. So that was really the piece that I continue to think is missing around foundational skills.
And do those foundational skills have a typical way to sort of digest or express, or if you wanted to, I don't know how you think about kind of goal setting or accomplishment or achievement, but how do you decide if you've sort of achieved what you want to achieve with something like creativity as a skill?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think outcomes assessment, that's sort of a pretty big open question that we're kind of grappling with right now. Maybe I'll let Josh speak to this because I know you've thought about it a little bit, probably do a better job of it.
Sure. I mean, it's a really tricky question. So I think, if we think about it from first principles, if students don't want to be there, they're not going to learn. So I think fundamentally we have to first solve the problem of getting students engaged and curious and interested in the act of learning. Once that happens, there are a bunch of other things that you can do. Like, I think, with advances in machine learning and artificial intelligence, there are new ways of doing sort of stealth assessment where you can get a sense of what students are taking away from different experiences without doing overt, tests and things like that. So one example would be this analytics tool that we're building will ultimately have phrase detection. And so if one of the skills that we want discussion leaders to have is active listening, when discussion leaders do something like, building off of what Aashay just said, or, Tinsley mentioned artificial intelligence a few minutes ago, I just want to say, things like that show that students are really engaged in the conversation and listening to what each other is saying. That's a way of doing, once we can build out that kind of tool, that's a way of doing a sort of assessment that is helpful for us, but then we hope to actually feed it back to the discussion leader and say, here's even gamify it. Like, you got a few points in this, active listening skill. Here are some phrases that we don't want to obviously give away what the the code is. But, and we also hope that tool will help the discussion leaders facilitate the conversation. So one of the things that we're building is just an average speaking time. So discussion leaders can tell which students are, holding back and which students are dominating a conversation so that they can use that to better moderate the dialogue, sort of like what New York Times does with like presidential debates. And you can even do, what topics did you focus on most? How does that relate to that week's topics? Things like that. But I think, principally we want to move away from the kind of assessment that is really more focused on school and teacher assessment rather than something that's useful for the student for their learning.
And I think one thing I'll add is over the long term, I also think there's some experimentation here to be done with more project-based learning. And that goes back to something Josh and Tinsley did with the high school redesign project, where, the goal was to do this redesign. And, along the way, you're learning all these different skills across different topics, right? Across all sorts of different subjects and topics that you wouldn't typically have in one course or one class. And so, I think something around active learning, actively doing something that helps you learn, understand something at an even deeper level, I think eventually is something we'll want to play with as well.
Right. And then does this, I think I totally hear you and agree that there are, challenges and kind of outcome assessment within kind of the closed system of a learning environment. But it sounds like there's a belief that through some technology tools, you could actually start to get some of that within a closed system. I wonder about when you move outside of the system. So I don't know if you have the concept of graduation, but do you have a hypothesis of what a graduate of Edgi, or is it like a certificate or a graduation, or I don't want to use the wrong term, but what's kind of the next step? Are you moving into a knowledge worker's role in kind of a career, or are you sort of a creator online or going to a college, or, what's sort of the mental model for what after the Edgi experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's definitely more experimenting to do here. One of the things that we're hoping for is currently, you get a certificate for participating in the program. Depending on how many times you participate in the program, that can level up because each program is very different. Conversations obviously change depending on who's in the cohort or the squad. You also get, the discussion leader opportunity is a great thing to put on your resume because it's a paid opportunity and you really get a deeper dive on this content. And you build some of these core skills that are critical for knowledge workers and really anyone in the 21st century. We're starting at supplemental courses that students do outside of school, but I think, and focusing on this content that isn't covered in school, but eventually we hope to sort of start taking over more of, credit-bearing courses for high schools. It's tricky because I think that's actually needs to correspond with a political conversation around what we really want to be teaching students in school, and re-examining what the requirements are at a state and federal level. So, my hope is that eventually we may have a platform to be able to help contribute to that conversation. But that really needs to happen to be able to open up. Right now a few students are getting like elective credit or technology, credits for participating in the program. But I think as that begins to change, we'll play a greater role there. I also think that one of the things that we'll be able to do once we have more students involved is really get a sense of what their interests are and help guide them to what careers they may be interested in. So, whether that's, this gets into a little more of the long-term vision, but we actually hope to open this up as a platform for other content creators to host courses, creators that students are already engaging with on TikTok and YouTube. As I said before, I learned a ton from people like Veritasium and Vsauce and Hank and John Green. There are amazing educational content creators out there that are making videos, and they make revenue from the ads on those videos, but there's no structure around those videos. And so you can watch a video or a TED Talk and then forget everything the next day. And so our hope is to be able to open this up as a platform for someone like Mark Rober to host a course and really have students engage with the material in a more meaningful way. Maybe they get a credential from Mark Rober, and then eventually maybe even Edgy students become discussion leaders, and then they want to become educational content creators, so then they can host courses. And that sort of participates in the growing creator economy and helps them create a business for themselves.
And do you think those audiences kind of get seeded within the Edgy ecosystem, or are there like each person goes outside of Edgy and builds their own audience? Or how do you think about sort of audience management within this?
Yeah, I think part of it is, we have in our deck this like build the flywheel. So we're hoping that obviously with any kind of marketplace, you have this issue of supply and demand. And I think, for these content creators, many of them have their own followers. And so if they're hosting a course on Edgy, they can bring their followers to the platform. Students may take their course, but then on the platform, they may discover other content creators. And so suddenly those other content creators grow their audiences. And once there's a critical mass of students engaging on the platform, you can then, have people launch their own courses, and maybe they start building their audience on the platform, and it becomes this sort of educational content creator discovery platform. I think first we really need to get the community aspect down, so that students feel like Edgy is a place that they want to gravitate to learn these things that they're not getting taught in school, and a trusted place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting to think about how, I'm curious how you think about like having a class of students or maybe like a group of neighborhood friends who are like, we really trust each other and we feel safe around each other. And like, there's so many things to learn in the world. All I care is that it's with these 10 people and like we're teaching each other things, versus maybe like the solo kid somewhere who's not necessarily like connected with other learners in this sense already, but is going on the platform, finding different courses, maybe more of like hopping from group to group. Like what's the kind of like what interpersonal dynamics have you found working well, and what's your vision for what would be exciting to see in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've had some really fun and interesting experiences of running these programs. So in the fall, we had a bunch of students. We piloted this all in Berkshire County in Western Massachusetts. I have personal connections here. It was actually, we started at the high school that I graduated from but never actually went to after I got kicked out of boarding school. They're fantastic, and I feel like I owe them. So we've been working with them closely for these courses and also with the high school redesign. And we noticed in the fall program that some of the student-led discussions had like 7 or 8 students all from the same school who all knew each other. And it created a really close community because they already felt comfortable with each other. They were teasing each other. Students who went to other schools who didn't know them very well felt comfortable because there was this atmosphere that was created. And, sometimes they would go off the rails, obviously. But for the most part, all of their conversations, even the tangents, were really interesting. And then on the other hand, this past program that we just ran, we had a ton of squads that had, nobody knew each other, and they were all from different schools. And they loved getting to know, it was still in Berkshire County, but they got to know students that they would only meet if they were like competing in sports. And suddenly they were like, oh man, I could be friends with these people, and they only live like 15 minutes away, but we never interact otherwise. Yeah. But it took a few extra weeks for them to get comfortable talking to each other.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. I'm sure both things work for different people, and just like depending on, do you end up partnering with more schools which have established classrooms, or is this more like individual kind of curious minds on the internet coming to find Edgi and like using it will probably like grow it in different directions. So
yeah, we definitely want to create a place where you can suggest or make it easy to invite your friends or say, I want to be in a squad with this person, because our experience is like, if you want to do this with a friend, that's going to be a great experience for you. And we want to encourage that, and also make sure that the community and an environment and the squads are open enough that anyone jumping in feels included.
Yeah.
How long have you been operating squads? Like, is this like one or two sessions we've had, or kind of just getting started, or how does it look?
Yeah, so when the pandemic hit, we decided we couldn't run the annual symposium. That was basically a year ago. Over the summer, we ran a pilot where I led two squads with 15 students each. Then in last fall, we did it with 100 students and broke it into like 12 students per squad. So we had, 9 or 10 squads running. And then this past one, we had another 6 or 7 squads running. So we've done somewhere around 22 squads, something like that.
Mm-hmm. And does it feel like each time you run a different session, you come away with new learnings or reshaping, some of your core beliefs?
Yeah, totally. So, the program's changed dramatically. So for Discord, for example, was something that we only introduced in the last week of the fall program. So we really only started playing with that idea in the spring and running these social events, these like extra outside things where different squads could meet students who are participating in Edgi, but not necessarily in their squads. They loved actually we did this trivia competition where you competed by squad. So you got to join your squad and compete with other Edgi squads, which was fun. For the content, I actually in the fall made 15 to 20 minute YouTube lecture videos that the students watched, and noticed looking at the YouTube analytics that the students were watching like 4 minutes of it, and that was it. Or I even in some conversations asked the students, how much of it they were watching, and they said that they watched it while playing video games in their corner. So then I thought, we've been, this is a joke, but we're probably actually going to do this, like streaming on Twitch while talking about technology and the future of work or things like this. I think might be a good way to get students engaged. That's why we switched to TikTok. I think TikTok might be too short. You can't really get into these issues as much as I'd like to. So we'll probably end up around like the 3 to 5 minute lecture video style. Yeah, programs changed dramatically.
Yeah, and it sounds like based on your kind of offline relationships and kind of the seed of some of the initial people, there's a lot of like really hands-on, kind of almost what you might call like a very white glove service where you're really talking to people and figuring out what they need. So I guess that helps shape content and community. And then you mentioned some of the vision of what you want to achieve with technology. So are you kind of doing all of it at the same time, or are you sequencing them and like getting content and community right and then investing in technology later? How do you think about sort of that kind of balance or juggling act?
Yeah, the technology, we're really just, I had a few interns from NYU who had like taken some of my courses that just wanted to help out build a very basic version just to show that it was possible. We're not at the scale yet where we need to rely on something like that to maintain quality. We know all of the discussion leaders. We can even watch the sessions. if we need to make sure that, there's no issue. I think right now we need to figure out, we have this like marketing hypothesis. One of the reasons why we're working with Aashay is to figure out we think that targeting students directly is the way to go. And if you can convince them that this is something that they want to do, they'll go to their parents, and the parents will be willing to pay anything to get their kids to do an educational program, because they're not used to, they're used to like having to convince their kids to do an educational program. But we're still figuring out which kind of students this appeals most to, and the kind of language that we need to use to target that student in the channels that they most engage with. So I'd say, content first, and then building out the community. And then eventually at scale, the technology piece will become important.
Right. And, when you talk about sort of the marketing and the channels and stuff, it almost seems like you've got, a little bit of lightning in a bottle with the TikTok stuff you're doing. So I wonder, when how do you think about that within a portfolio of other attempts versus, like, if you've got something that works, can you double down, triple down, turn that into like a very nice top of funnel, or is that sort of a bit too disconnected from the core experience in your mind, or how does that all hang together?
Yeah, so I'll let Aashay elaborate on this more, but I think to start, TikTok is still a new platform, so it's very hard to tell what age demographic is really engaging with our content the most. We can kind of tell just by reading the comments, but I also think TikTok's a little hesitant to say the actual ages, because they have a lot of kids that probably shouldn't be on TikTok. So until that gets built out, the other complication with content is just that it's hard to produce these videos, and our team is very small at the moment. So until we do like a proper fundraising round and bring on a few people to help with content production, it just takes a lot of time to make those videos, although they are clearly resonating. And I think eventually that will be a clear sort of funnel. Aashay, I'd love if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah. So I definitely think we want to try and take advantage of this sort of growing audience on TikTok as much as possible. But taking a step back, I think, Josh mentioned we have this hypothesis that going to students directly is the way to go here, especially if we can crack it. It can turn out to be quite a go-to-market advantage that others would find hard to kind of replicate. So it's a really hard challenge, but if we can make it happen, it could open up a lot for us. So I think eventually, yes, when we have a little bit of a bigger team on the content side to produce those sorts of videos on a regular basis, we could see that being a major kind of top of funnel, as you mentioned, channel for us. The other thing we have to figure out is how do we actually, how do we make sure that we're not just getting followers on TikTok, but actually people coming to the website, signing up for programs, interacting with us lower down the funnel. So just, working through the different aspects of the funnel. I think one of the pieces is also, how do we create lower friction experiences, right? So right now we have the 6-week program. It costs between $250 and $500. And for an unknown company, that could be a challenge for most people to just decide to pay for when they first hear about it. So we're thinking of different ways that we could lower the barrier, whether that's, creating an open Discord community, and we need to figure that piece out. Probably not for this program, but maybe for the next one. Other things we're thinking of is, can we create shorter programs? Does it have to be 6 weeks? Can we do some sort of weekend session, or, allow people to sign up for 1 week and try it out? So I think we definitely want to experiment with that part of the funnel, TikTok to something lower friction, to then eventually the 6-week program. Other things I think we want to test on the marketing side is, kids love things that they hear about from other kids, right? And so how do we actually, that's word of mouth, but how do we actually try to engineer that process a little bit rather than just, letting it happen? And it's really hard to measure. So, as Josh said, so far, I think we've served about 150 students. can we get them to talk more about it? Can we have them tell all of their friends about it? How do we make that sort of work? And I think that's part of the challenge this summer, is, we're trying to create a referral program that gives them some sort of incentive to actually tell their friends about it. And we also want to test ads. I'm personally a little more skeptical of it. I'm not sure if it's going to work, especially with high school students, but we want to try it on platforms like TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram. Maybe even do ads for parents. I think that's another interesting way for us to go. And then the last thing I'll add is, I think it might be, we've talked about this in a couple of different ways, but we're not clear if kids will be willing to pay for this directly. And if not, then how do we enable them to tell their parents about it? So, we could have something like reserve my spot, right? Which allows the child to kind of express their interest and then enter their parents' email or some form of communication. And we would then kind of take care of the rest of the aspect of reaching out to parents and telling them, hey, Max wants to do this program. Here's the details. Here's where you can learn more. And this is where you can sign up for it. Or even have some sort of sliding scale where the kids can pay some small amount and then the rest kind of goes to the parents. So yeah, there's a lot of open questions and experimentation to be done here, but we feel excited that if we can kind of work on this challenge, then we have something good here from a go-to-market perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think of like in high schools especially, I feel like, at least in my experience, if you can find like the one or two classes or the one or two like amazing teachers, they're often like a node for these friend groups naturally. Like I think throughout my 4 years of high school, the people like my high school offered Latin and like was super, like the teacher was just amazing. And so that was like a proxy for whoever was in that Latin class was usually like just became really good friends and often shared a lot of other interests. And I kind of think like if that Latin teacher had just emailed that group of like 15 students, hey, like check this out, I feel like that person is an interesting node into that social group. But I mean, that happens like rarely. I'm sure every high school has like 3 or 4 teachers like that. But kind of thinking about like, less likely I think that I would have heard of something like this from a fellow student. But if a teacher had been like, you're like the intellectually curious kind of fun friend group that I know of, and like I trust this resource, that could also be interesting.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I know Tinsley and Josh, you guys have, it's been something that has been tried, right, in the past with guidance counselors and certain teachers. Yeah. So
we for the summer program had an amazing guidance counselor at the school Josh was talking about that he graduated from. The guidance counselor just sent an email to students, and they all love him, and were excited about the opportunity, and felt like they were just getting it from a trusted and fun source.
Yeah. We have to find that scale too. That worked because we have the personal connection, and I think one of the this also relates to marketing messaging. But on our homepage right now, it says "Learn the things they don't teach you in school," which I think could be potentially polarizing to some in schools. So it's finding that balance.
When thinking about these different kind of growth levers and marketing opportunities, it sounds like there's the sort of the bootstrap kind of non-scalable things that you're doing and that are working, but then you're sort of looking a little bit at more scalable things. And so I heard referrals, potentially ads. One thing that I am curious about, given the nature of how this stuff works, is you've got a bunch of people who are coming together and they're wrestling with these problems and kind of forming their own opinions and kind of forming their own view and take, presumably at the throughout the process. And I wonder if there are ways to take some of the success of what you're doing in content creation on TikTok and sort of encourage or enable people to remix and become themselves creators and participants in like an ecosystem that you're participating in. Because if you're inspiring a new form of creation, a new type of creator, a community of creators, I think their creations themselves will get shared out and help draw more visibility back. And it's also, it's authentic because it's the person who had the experience doing the thing that they can newly do because of the experience, and it's a piece of media that can get, can get shared around and can get visibility into what this is all about. So I wonder how creation might play, kind of student-led reaction or creation might play a role in growth. Is that something you have a view on or thinking about?
That's a great idea. So one of the things that we've been struggling with actually is trying to figure out a project that we can have the students do that feels real. One of the things that Tinsley and I learned from doing, it was called Edify Projects, this like school redesign thing, was that the symposium was crucially important. The fact that students got to present their work in a forum, have people, we had Yale School of Architecture and, other institutions, people from the Obama Foundation come, and that elevated the work that the students were doing, and they really felt like it was important. And it's, I definitely think that we should explore more. I could see a few students who are in our program making great TikToks, for example, talking about some of these issues that we could then even reshare on our social platforms, or make TikTok montages of them. And they, all of their friends are followers on their TikTok. So if they made something like that, and we could help them by creating some kind of template, or even like logos or assets that they could stick in there.
Right. I'm looking at like on the Edgi Learning TikTok account, the most recent one, I think he's talking about Neuralink, and that seems like the kind of topic. I'm actually, I'm not at all an expert on TikTok. I'm like a casual user, but I like a bunch of stuff. Like I really am into like the karaoke duets. I think that's really fun, but I love the fact that it kind of has somebody gives a take and then somebody else does their take on that take. And that feels really natural, and there's a lot of encouragement around that. So I'm not sure exactly how distribution works there, but I wonder, like, could people come and give a reaction to something you say, Josh, something you say in the Neuralink video? Can they ask a question that then goes out, or can they even, even something silly like do a dance? Can you propose something or take a track that's famous? I don't know how much you use music as part of your stuff. But take, one of the tracks that's kind of a meme and do something Neuralink-like and do a dance to it. I don't know exactly what this looks like, but it feels to me like there's like content that can be a seed for more content remixing that probably just works really well on the platform.
Yeah, I think that's great. And also, this reminds me, we did a student interview recently with this girl named Chechi, who we asked, how would you describe the program in 3 words? And she said, inspiring, fun, and social. And then when asked to elaborate, when she talked about inspiring, she mentioned that after every session, she's usually in a good mood. And she calls her dad to talk to him about some of the issues, or her friends, and FaceTimes them and says, we just talked about income inequality as it relates to technological progress. And finding ways to make that more of a public thing so that she's sharing that more, publicly, socially, that conversation with her friends. I think it would be a great way, to get students exposed to Edgi and create a funnel.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. Given that I've never done anything on TikTok like you have, I'm very curious. You mentioned sort of the cost of production. I wonder sort of what does that look like? Is it the reps that you take before you have a hit? Is it do you have a team of people who help with production and ideas, and what is the cost, and what did it take before you really found that worked the way it does?
Yeah, so just to give a quick recap of our TikTok journey, we started right at the beginning of the fall. We had an NYU intern, Olivia, who's a model and computer science, studying computer science, who already had some TikTok followers just do it. And she was just making funny things. If you go to the bottom of our TikTok page, it's just like her in New York, complaining about doing school. And that kind of thing is really what resonates on TikTok. And people have been trying to hack the algorithm, and it's just impossible. It's like things that really feel authentic and transparent and relatable are things that do really well. and we just had a conversation actually this morning with Aashay about this, because so that was the beginning of we probably got like 25,000 followers from that. And then in January, I had one of my friends come help us make a few videos, someone who we would consider bringing on once we raised a round. And he helped us produce like 4 videos in 3 days, including the GPT-3 video. And those kinds of videos take a lot more production because they are scripted. I have to do like a performance in front of a green screen. We have to edit the background images. You time it to music, and they're really like educational pieces. Those take more effort, but so long as we found that if they're well written, the scripts are well written, and they're on relevant topics that are, and sort of done in somewhat of a sensational way, they do well. And so we would try to double down on that, sort of provide educational content that is useful for everyone, and then I hope that some of it touches high schoolers. For the most part, things that do on TikTok are not the well-produced things. But yeah, so our experience is that, at least for the educational content, it has to be, because it's hard to get a point across in 60 seconds, like really explain something in 60 seconds is very difficult. So it took a lot of workshopping and like a little writer's room to get that. Yeah.
And do you think, like, at some amount of scale, do you keep doubling down on that? Because it seems like it's like fixed cost in, and very scalable as all media is. So is that something that'd be like one of the organizational muscles that you build with Edgi, is being really good at creating that kind of content?
Definitely. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. One of them is that if we grow our following to a certain scale, we can then just start monetizing that in other ways, which will help. 2, it helps if we're going to try to bring on other content creators to the platform. They will feel more comfortable knowing that we're like them. We also make this kinds of content, and that will help create those relationships. And I also just think that it's sort of like, it's a good thing to do anyway, because we care. It's mission aligned. We care about these issues. We think more people should be talking about them. It's one of the reasons why I joined the Yang campaign, was that I felt like, regardless of whether he became president or not, he would impact the conversation, and that's really important. It can expedite, certain policies being enacted when people actually are aware and talk about these issues. So, I definitely think we will double down on that, for sure.
Cool. That's really exciting. I noticed it's like the time just flew by. We're actually already past the hour. I think we still have like stables of questions to ask. So much interesting stuff going on here. So I guess before, we should wrap soon, but before we wrap, I wanted to get a little sense, because you've sort of mentioned a little bit about the team and about a potential fundraise, and I wonder, is that something that you're actively fundraising, and then you're going to expand the team? And what does the team look like right now? Like, is it just the few of you, or you have kind of some part-time interns and contractors here and there? What does the Edgi org look like?
Yeah, so right now it's just us 3, and then we have our beloved program manager, Dohi, who's been with us since the pilot, who actually was one of my students at NYU. So it's just us for now. We're trying to figure out how much it makes sense to raise, sort of, thinking about what we'll need over the next year, whether we want to really raise for the next 12 to 18 months, and how that corresponds with the programs that are upcoming, and how we'll use that funding. But it's an active exploration, and I think we're definitely interested in having conversations about it with people.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think about, like, if you were to raise some money, do you imagine that you want to build out one of those areas very deeply, or you want to build out a little bit on each to get more experience with that? Or how do you think about, like, what would be a milestone you'd want to accomplish?
Yeah, content. Really solidifying the marketing funnel with our organic content, and bringing on a few people that can help with video production and help us make that educational content, because it doubles as the course content, and sort of makes the courses better and more robust, and helps, make the experience for students in the program more engaging, and also as that initial touch point for potential customers. So that's definitely where we would focus our efforts.
Very cool. Well, I know we're over time already. I wanted to just check if there's any other kind of last ideas or thoughts or things that we hadn't gotten to that we should have.
Aashay, Tinsley, what do you guys think?
I don't think so. Yeah, I feel like we talked about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I guess what's on deck for us is this upcoming summer program. So that starts on June 28th, and we're looking to get students for 2 courses. So one would be Technology in the Future of Work, which will be student-led. The discussions will be student-led. And then Capitalism and the Economy, based on student demand. They wanted that one. So we're doing it. And Josh is going to lead those discussions.
And do you have like a link that we could share?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's for the application for the discussion leaders or application for the program.
Yeah, so I'm just going to post the link to our website and check out the courses. This is actually a new site, so we're excited about that. And then you can just sign up right there. So that's for the summer program, open to grades 9 through 12.
Beginning June 28th, you said.
That's right.
Awesome. Okay, well, I want to thank you for spending the time with us. This was super fun. If we can ever be helpful, or you want to chat again about more stuff, we'd love to have you back. So, always, this is a topic that we care about a lot, and you guys are all deeply thoughtful about it. So we'd love to spend more time and learn more from your process.
Awesome.
Yeah, this was fun. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay.
All right,
Bye-bye.
see ya.